Join us. Today we're joined by Jessica Gadboy at Acumatica, pre-sales engineer. She's going to be talking about the integration between ERP and customer relationship management, the CRM, embedded CRM in Acumatica. And we're going to get started just in a few minutes here. I just wanted to start with some housekeeping notes. If you look on your webinar pane right next to your name, there's a couple buttons. There's a hand button and there's a question mark button. We just ask that if you have any questions, you just click on that question mark button and a dialog box will open up where you can go ahead and key in your question. And we're going to be reserving the announcing of those questions until the end of the webinar. And with that said, Jessica, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adrienne, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And just like she said, just feel free to keep your questions coming in throughout the course of today's presentation, and we'll take those at the end. But today we're talking about CRM. So just like Adrienne said, you know, the real focus when we're talking about Acumatica CRM is the fact that we can paint this whole picture of a fully integrated ERP with your financials, your customer management, down to, you know, the sales order to invoice process. And of course, there's several additional items that you can tack on to that, like field services and manufacturing or e-commerce. So I did put together a quick agenda just for where we'll be going today. The first thing we'll look at is the CRM flow, and that's really just a process diagram of how the CRM is integrated with the rest of the system. Then we'll jump into a demo. So we'll start with a few CRM dashboards. Then we'll take a look at an Outlook, or the Acumatica Outlook plugin, which is one example of an external connected application that you might want to plug into your CRM. Then we'll jump into managing leads and customers, as well as managing opportunities and any activities related to those leads, customers, or opportunities. We'll spend a few minutes on marketing automation and take even a sneak peek at the Hubspot integration. And then finally, we'll talk about support automation. So that's your case management and the customer portal. So giving customers their own access to log in, place their own orders, review some of their documents, etc. So that's where we'll be going today. I'm not a huge fan of slides, so there really is only a few slides that I have for you all today. For those of you that are brand new to the Acumatica community, you might not have seen this type of presentation before, so just important to keep in mind that this is a 100% browser-enabled system. Anywhere that you have access to the internet, you have access to Acumatica. And that's really the major point that I'd like you to take away from all of this. You know, there's this big focus on mobility, especially in 2018. So also being able to log into a mobile application, utilize a tablet out in the field, those are really some of the key drivers of Acumatica's go-to market in this 2018 year. Now this is the CRM process diagram that I was talking about, and it really just paints this picture starting from left to right of how leads are going to enter the system over here on the left, and then once they do enter the system, where they can go from there. So as I mentioned, we'll start by taking a look at the Outlook plugin in just a few minutes. So that would be one way that new leads could enter Acumatica. I just mentioned the mobile app a minute ago. Import scenarios is another big factor, which essentially allows you to make mass updates to the system. So a good example of an import scenario for leads would be a trade show. If you're out at a trade show and you're collecting leads there, you could do an import into the system to create new lead records for all of those contacts that you've generated out at the event. And then a website integration as well. If you wanted to generate new lead records from individuals or companies that are filling out forms on your website, then you can also have those flow directly into Acumatica. So once they get there, once they enter the system, and we'll see some of this in just a few minutes, you can use what we call assignment and approval maps to automatically assign those leads to your sales team. So that can be based on a number of conditions like perhaps state or area code, you know, all leads that come in the New England territory, any of those states that fall under New England, we would like to assign to Maxwell. So you can start to build those assignment and approval maps. We can do the same thing for making approvals. Perhaps, a quote that's over a certain dollar amount needs to be approved by an executive. We can also set up automation rules to direct those to the appropriate individuals. Now, I won't spend too much more time on this slide because you're going to see a lot of this in the demo. So actually managing tasks and activities. Once those leads are entered, how you can, of course, attach the contacts directly to the lead records, but then also generate opportunities against those individuals. So this would be, for your sales team to plan pipeline forecasting and that type of thing. So let's dive in right now. Of course, over on the right-hand side, you're going to see the case management piece. But let's dive in deeper into these slides for just a minute before we actually get into the demo. Now, I mentioned one example of this open approach of Acumatica. So we really have this firm belief that our system and our platform needs to allow the ability to integrate to external applications. So I mentioned Outlook just a minute ago, but a number of the applications on this slide are other good examples. Hubspot might be, from a marketing standpoint, one that you would want to integrate with the ERP. Avalara for sales tax, DocuSign or Adobe Sign on the e-signature front. So we also have really created a platform with our open APIs that allow you to bring in these types of external systems and have them communicating with your ERP very easily. Now, I promised I wouldn't spend too much time on slides, so let's just jump directly into the software now and really start to expand on a lot of those topics that we just covered together. So to start us off, I'll just do a quick refresh here to make sure that I'm all logged in and ready to go. And what I would like to, at least for anybody that hasn't seen Acumatica before, is just briefly cover the purpose of our dashboards and what you're going to get the ability to do behind them. So a sales manager dashboard is the one that I would like to start with. So you saw this just a second ago. But a sales manager dashboard would essentially be giving you the view of your entire sales team, right? So this is the high level, the manager looking across his entire sales team. Because we are a role-based system, you can have these types of dashboards or these types of home pages based on the role. So here the sales manager is looking at the entire sales team, but somebody like a salesperson is not going to be looking at that whole team, but rather they're going to be looking at themselves as an individual. They can only see their new leads, their current opportunities that are closing within the next 60 days. It's very much centered around this parameter, which is me, the salesperson that's logged in. And this is expansive throughout the system. So people in the warehouse are going to have their own custom dashboard. People on the marketing team will have their own, etc. And you can use these dashboards really for actionable insight that send you triggers and notifications about business events that require your attention. So like I said a moment ago, we see this salesperson is getting this indication that they have 3 new leads that require their attention. You can drill directly down into that to start to see what that information is or who those new leads are and start to take some action there. So we will do that in just a moment, but just back to dashboards for 1 second. The other thing I will say about them is they're very easy to design. So if you wanted to just design here, do a quick drag and drop, move some of these items around. These can also be color coded based on your preferences. So we're seeing here, when we're below our normal level of 2, we want to show it as a green color. But anytime we get over this alarm level of 5, we need to see this in the red range. So you can also design those types of color-coded triggers just to draw your eyes to the things that need your attention most promptly. Now, that's enough, I think, for dashboards just now, but just keep that in mind from a CRM standpoint that everybody is going to have these dashboards that are guiding them through the system. And I think the main purpose of starting the demonstration from the beginning would be around lead management. So we saw this diagram just a moment ago. We talked about the Outlook plugin just a moment ago, but let's start there just so you can understand from a new lead standpoint how this could begin. So I'm just actually bringing up my Outlook inbox, and what you're going to see here is, first of all, I'll click on the email that I would like to bring into the system, or the lead that I would like to bring into the system. And when I click on this home button, once the plugin has been installed, you'll have this blue Acumatica plugin button. So when you click on that, you'll see that it identifies the email address that has emailed you, and it will reach into Acumatica and determine if that email address already exists in Acumatica or not. So here we can see this one has actually already been created as a lead. So because I've created it as a lead, I can view that lead record directly. I can go in and I can log the activity, which would actually take this email that was sent to me and log it as an activity in the CRM. Or I could even create a brand new opportunity from within my Outlook inbox. So this is all linked directly back into Acumatica. Now, for those email addresses that have never contacted me before, the ones that are not leads or contacts in my system just yet, you'll see that when I click that Acumatica button, I get a different set of options. So I can actually create a brand new lead, or I can create a contact at this point, which was different from the individual who happens to be myself, but I was actually allowed to go in there and view their account and create the opportunity. So if I do a view account there, it is going to pull directly into Acumatica here. Stuck on my other screen, just a second. 2 monitors. And here you can just see the contact record for that individual that was emailing me. So a direct plugin to Outlook from Acumatica and vice versa if you are interested in having that bi-directional sync. So very easy. I know our sales team uses it as well. They have emails that are coming in all day that they would like to log in the system, and they can just click that log activity button within Outlook to actually get those emails into the system with one click. So there's a little bit about the Outlook plugin. If you do have any additional questions on that, like Adrian and myself said, just feel free to keep putting those into the chat box, and I'd be happy to answer those. Let's dive back to the software. And I'm going to pull up my salesperson dashboard one more time, and we'll start to talk a little bit more about lead management. So we can assume, a lead just came into the system from any number of areas. From Outlook, like we just saw, it could come in from an import, from an event, like we talked about, or from the website. And I will just take from the salesperson dashboard this inquiry again for my new leads. So we'll drill back into our new leads. And I talked about assignment and approval maps briefly, but keep in mind that these can be guided to the salesperson based on any conditions that you've set. So if for an individual state, these all need to be assigned to Maxwell was my example, we can trigger that to happen automatically. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to go into my all records here, and let's see if I can pull up a new lead. We'll pull up this one here for Hyper Software. And I've actually already converted this into a customer, so you'll see that the status is converted. But just take a look at some of the tabs that we have available here. So first of all, my activities. For any lead that has entered the system, I can start to track activities against this. We can do things like add new notes in here. Let me actually find us a better lead since this one has already been converted. I'll take an open one that has not been converted just yet. Let's take this one here. It wants to give me Jackson James. That's okay, we'll still work with this one. So from an activity management standpoint, tasks can be utilized to both hold yourself and others accountable. So we use, again, task management internally. If I wanted to create a new task for myself to perhaps follow up with this lead in 1 week, or if I wanted to assign a task to another individual within my company, I could also tell them, here's a task that you need to complete this quote by April 23rd, or whatever the individual task that I would like to assign to my team looks like. And those can also be based on work groups, so you can actually assign tasks to entire teams if you need to do that. Now, the other piece of this, once your leads enter the system, you would likely want to start creating opportunities against them. So opportunity management is what you would use for your pipeline forecasting, and I alluded to that just a moment ago. So pipeline forecasting is really helping both the sales management and the sales team to organize their forward-looking sales and communicate back to upper management what revenue we think we're going to drive for that particular period. So let me grab one of these open opportunities here. And again, you start to see some of that history come in. So the 360-degree visibility across the entire sales team. Here under my activities tab, I can see any communication that has happened. So we were looking at a lead record just a second ago, which of course has less history because it's new to the system. But from this opportunity standpoint, I can see here that yes, there was an email that went back and forth. Here's actually the quote that we already extended to the customer. Now, beyond some of those activities that we can create within the system, you can also attach files. So here you can see a copy of this quote has been actually attached to this opportunity. So based on, I can drill into that if you'd like to see it. So based on the products that we added to this and based on the total amount of the quote that we created, there's what the PDF looks like that went out to the client. And we can go through some of this in more detail in just a moment here, but just giving you the overview of the visibility across the team. Now, you can also attach files pretty universally across the system. So if you needed to maybe upload an Excel document or upload another copy of a particular document to an opportunity record or a customer record within Acumatica, anywhere you see that files cabinet, you can do a browse and then upload, and you can track your documents and manage your documents within Acumatica. We didn't talk about the universal search just yet, but the search bar is also there if you need it. And those documents that get uploaded to the document repository can also be searched against later on. Now, I talked about pipeline forecasting briefly, but the big piece of this is that the stages of your opportunities is what is related to the probability of this opportunity closing. So under my details tab here, I see that the probability of this opportunity closing right now is 0. And that's because it's in this very initial prospect stage. So and these stages can certainly be edited based on your own organization, so you don't have to use the stages that you see listed here. But if I were to move this stage up, so as a salesperson, I'm tracking my activities, I'm moving my stage along during the sales process, and I see that probability jump up to 40% when I move into that solution stage. Now that probability rolls into our pipeline forecasting report, and management has a better picture of what they think they can expect for revenue in that particular period. So that's how the stage is related to the probability. Beyond that, these are the products that we saw on the quote just a second ago. So you can add products both at the opportunity level and the quote level. One more time, just for those of you that are new to Acumatica, this is a fully linked system. So down to the inventory, down to the invoicing, which is why you can always have your real-time view of inventory, even when you're working in the CRM and on the order management side. So there are some of the products that were added. You can link one or multiple quotes to an opportunity record. So I drilled into that quote just a moment ago so you could see an example of it, but also you have this create quote button at the very top of the opportunity record. So I can create as many quotes as I need to, and one quote is going to be used as the primary quote for this opportunity. And what that means is perhaps you sent a quote out to the customer, they didn't like what they saw, the products were incorrect. So you can issue a new quote, mark that one as your primary, and then when you have to convert it to a sales order, the items, the currency, the costs, or excuse me, the prices I should say, on that primary quote are the ones that get pulled onto the sales order. So if I go in I can say create quote here. You can decide if you'd like to pull in the products from the opportunity, or maybe we'd like to start from scratch. And would we like to make this new quote the primary one? And I'll say yes. So we'll create and review here. It takes me over to my quote page. And of course, I can add new products at this point if I'd prefer to. So maybe I could say, this time around, we'd like to sell the Acer laptop. What quantity are we looking at? Maybe something like a quantity of 5. And you can start to fill in the details of the quote here. Now, because the email system is integrated with the rest of the ERP and the CRM, you can actually email this quote directly out to the customer, like you saw just a moment ago when I pulled that PDF up. So first I'll say submit the quote. So this is in fact done being prepared. This is the quote that we would like to use, and we do want to mark it as primary as well. I can then send this out via email, and it's going through the internal Acumatica email system, and it's changing that status now of this quote to send. So the customer now has, if we go back to the original opportunity record that we were looking at, I'm going to see 2 quotes that now appear on this opportunity record, and the one that we just created a moment ago is now being used as my primary quote. And I won't go back through showing the PDF. We saw what an example of that printed out looks like. And now that I have created this, I can convert it into a sales order if I would like to do so. I'm not going to do that today. The focus of today's demonstration is more on the CRM rather than distribution, so I won't go to the sales order side. But what I am going to do is take us away from this discussion around opportunities and quotes for a moment. And now I'm going to take us into a customer record. So we'll use somebody that has a bit more history, somebody that isn't a brand new lead. So let me just pull up my business accounts here, and I'll just drill into one right at the top of my list. So your business accounts in Acumatica, these are your business account profiles. So they can be customers, they can be vendors, they can be employees, and these records are where you manage the details that are related to that customer's account. So the lead that we started with didn't have too much data in there, but once they're actually purchasing from us, we can do things like store their delivery addresses, their billing addresses. If they have multiple locations, if it's a national account, we can store their multiple locations in there and actually ship or bill to those multiple locations. So those are some of the things that start to get linked to the back-end GL as well. Marketing lists and marketing campaigns. You can also start to link your leads and your customers to those campaigns and lists. And we'll talk about marketing automation in just a second, so hold that thought. But the other piece of this is, of course, everything that we just talked about, the opportunity management, the activity management, the culmination of all of that can be seen from this customer's record. So here I'll be able to see any opportunity history for this particular customer. If there were any support cases that have been entered, and we'll talk about support cases in just a minute, I'm going to see all of that stacked up on this customer's record. So the goal here is for anyone on the sales team or anyone in the organization, as soon as they navigate to this customer's account, they can very easily get an understanding of what has been going on within this record, if there's any open incidents, and what the discussions have been like until recently. So just from a visibility standpoint, I did think it was important to cover the customer record, but I said hold the thought on marketing for a moment. So let's talk about how some of the marketing pieces can tie into this and be automated to actually take those leads and contacts that you've started to generate and utilize them on the marketing side. So I'm going to take you into my marketing workspace, and I'm going to pull up a marketing list to get us started. And here I see that I have a number of lists that have been built out here, but I will pull up the new one for my new leads. It's the marketing list that we'll use today. And of course, I just have the name of my list here, pretty generic around the summary section. But first thing I'll note here is this checkbox for dynamic list. So Acumatica marketing lists can be self-managed or dynamic. Now, a self-managed list is just like it sounds. Whoever you manually add to that list is who stays on that list unless you manually remove them. So the same people that I put there on Monday are going to be the same people I see there on Friday. A dynamic list is a list that is actually based on certain conditions that you have defined. So what I mean by that would be new leads in this example right here. We have the selection criteria that has been defined. So any leads that have come in with a new status this month only, so within the last 30 days, within this month that we're in right now, we would like to add them to this marketing list. So the fact that this is dynamic means that 30 days from today, I'm going to have a brand new list because it's only utilizing the people, or the leads, I should say, that have come into the system within the last 30 days. So you can start to generate those lists based on a number of criteria, and then you can take the lists and you can utilize mass emailing within Acumatica to communicate with those individuals. So one more time, I'll take you into my marketing workspace, and what I'm going to do is take you over to my mass emails. And we will look at one that has already gone out. So I have one set up in there. And this is an example of a mass email. So here's just the message that went out. You can pull in HTML from the system. So where you see Dear Display Name, it will actually pull in the contact information and use the first name of that individual on the emailing list. So just a couple of tricks to be aware of. For this particular email, we've set up the subject, we've set up who it's going to, and we have also have the status for planned. So when is this particular marketing email going to be sent out? And this one was in the past. Now, under the marketing list tab, that's where I select who I would like it to go to. So we're in fact going to use our new leads marketing list that we just saw a moment ago. And the message that we saw on the summary tab would be the one that we're utilizing. So we don't necessarily have to fill out anything on the messages tab. And we've already had the discussion around the built-in email system, but you could actually now go ahead and send this out. And the result is you can track any responses that you get from this mass email. I'll also, in just a moment, bring up a Hubspot account because a lot of people prefer to use systems like Hubspot to actually track some of their marketing analytics. So again, hold that thought for just a second, and we can see the results that we would find from something like the Hubspot application. But lastly, I'll bring up my marketing campaigns. And this time I'll bring up, let's do this partnership campaign that's in here, because this is one example of where you can start to see those statistics around your campaigns. So my budget versus my expected return has been set up for this particular marketing campaign for our partners. Again, we have the start date, and I didn't set a particular end date for this one. You can link your marketing campaigns to a promo code. So if someone does in fact make a purchase off of this campaign, they can enter the promo code to tie back into your statistics. And what we're seeing here is, of course, everything is real time. So this is a real-time view of these statistics. But how many leads have we actually generated from this campaign? How many opportunities have we generated versus how many have we won? And what is the value of those opportunities? So this is the goal, again, of the whole CRM being integrated with your ERP and financials, is starting to get this full picture of some of this data because it's now breaking down the walls and talking to each other. So I can also see any leads that have actually been generated and all of the individuals that have come in there, as well as any opportunities that have been generated. And of course, I can drill down into the details there as well. Now, before I take you over and just talk briefly about HubSpot for anybody that has interested, or anybody that is interested, excuse me, one piece of this that we haven't talked about just yet would be on the reporting side. So there are going to be hundreds of reports with Acumatica included out of the box, but any data that exists within the system, you can pull it out into a report. It just would, you'd have to customize them to display the information that you're looking for if there's not already one that exists out of the box. So just to give you an example, let's go over to marketing. I see I have my reports list here, and we'll pull a campaign summary just as one example. Again, real time, but now I can see each and every one of my campaigns. I can see what my budget versus my expected return is. I can see how many leads have been generated and then the conversion factors. Same thing on the opportunity percentages and the conversion factors and the value of all of those aggregated. So just a different view of this data, and of course you can build out these reports if something's missing. There's a field or a column missing, then you can absolutely add those. Again, not necessarily the purpose of our conversation today, but keep in mind that this is all linked with the back-end financials. So if I wanted to run, a balance sheet or a profit and loss, all of that information that is still culminating from my CRM is also going to be rolled up into my overall financial reports. So I won't spend much time there, but just for everybody to keep in mind. Hold on just a second. Adrian shot me an email, which is obviously important since she's organizing this meeting. Okay, not for me. So next thing I mentioned is let's talk about Hubspot for just a moment. So import scenarios would be one really important thing for everybody to be aware of, because this would be a way to mass update the system, which I alluded to earlier. And the integration with Hubspot happens to be based on an import scenario. So I've taken you to my import scenarios screen, and I'm just going to bring up my import leads from Hubspot. Now, an import scenario is one way to get a large volume of data. So I talked about this as well when we mentioned bringing leads from a trade show into the system. So you could build an import scenario that says, based on this Excel document, here is the mapping that we would like to bring this data into the system and actually place it onto a lead record. So the name on your Excel document would be linked up with the mapping that brings it into the name on your lead record. So that's how the basic import scenarios work. With Hubspot, we have done the same thing. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Hubspot application, it is essentially a very, very robust marketing tool that allows you to really go deeper with not only the analytics, but content management, really diving deep into clicks and who has opened what emails from us, who has clicked on what landing pages, and you can bring not only the leads into Acumatica from HubSpot, but then you can also build an integration to manage some of the statistics there. So let me just bring up our HubSpot account, and I'll just give you a quick preview of an email campaign that we ran earlier this year. So what I'm looking at here is this was a modern manufacturing campaign that Acumatica actually ran last year, so August of 2017. And this is one email that went out within that campaign. Now, I believe there was 14 emails in this campaign, so we have the statistics about all of them. You see that there was an open rate here of 14.2%. So that's actually really good. The typical open rate is about 10% for these types of mass campaigns or mass emails. So this was a high open rate that we had for this particular campaign. Over on the right, I see my unique clicks. So the click rate of who actually opened this and then clicked on the links within it. So if I drill into that unique clicks there, I'm actually going to see every single person that clicked on the links within that diagram, or within the email, I should say. So it gives me this really good, solid list of people that I can follow up with and start to make qualification types of requests with, because we know these are in fact people that were interested in the content that we were providing. Now, I won't spend too much time on HubSpot because that's not necessarily the purpose of our demonstration today, but I did at least want you to see the level of detail that you could get into with your marketing statistics. And then, like I said, any of these leads that actually get generated within HubSpot, you can then use an import scenario to bring them all into Acumatica. One thing I should mention about this is import scenarios can be put on a schedule, so you do not have to do this manually. You can schedule an import to happen every 5 minutes or even every 1 minute or once a month, just depends on the sequence you'd like to use. And what that would do is it would, depending on the time frame that you set, it would pull those leads in from HubSpot every 5 minutes or whatever that time frame was. So lots of opportunities around import scenarios when we're talking about the CRM. Switching gears one more time. So we've talked about a good amount in the CRM so far. Marketing automation was the most recent large chunk that we bit off of this pie here. But let's switch gears one more time and we'll talk about support or case management. So let me take you into a dashboard of a support manager. And dashboards are really going to be that home base for each and every user. So you can assume that, you know, some of the marketing functions that we were just doing could also be spawned from a dashboard. We see now that the support manager has a dashboard of all the cases that are open right now, which ones are high priority. Here's a picture of my support team. How many cases do they each have? Is anybody getting overloaded? So these dashboards, I continue to bring us back to them because they really do help to trigger these individuals to stay on top of their responsibilities by role. So as a manager, I can see everybody versus as a sales operations, or excuse me, a support operations tech, I would have an individual dashboard with just my specific information. But let's drill into one of these here. I'll pick my open cases and we're going to see this case list of all of the cases that we have right now. And I'll select this case number 115, which was a SaaS upgrade was requested. Cases, similarly to leads, as we talked about earlier, can be assigned via assignment maps. So what I mean by that would be, you know, any high priority cases could go to a certain individual, or any cases that are related to financials need to go to another individual. So you can also use those assignment maps to quickly direct cases to the appropriate folks and the appropriate resources to get them straightened out. Your activity management would tie back into this again. So when I look under my activities tab, I can see, based on this case, who has been working on it, what types of notes have they made, have any appointments actually been scheduled. So one more time, just that collaboration across the entire organization, I know what action has already been taken, which then allows me to take any next steps from here. Activities within Acumatica, and I'll add a new task because we talked about it briefly, but we didn't actually see it. Activities within Acumatica can also be linked to time. So if you wanted to not only track your time, so yes, maybe I spent 1 hour on this particular task, but you can also bill for that time. So if you are in an organization that maybe does service repairs, or you know, even in this example that we're talking about a SaaS upgrade, maybe you spent 1 hour on the phone with this client helping them with the upgrade and you need to bill for that time. So you can start to track the time that you actually spent on these activities, and then when you close the case, they can be rolled up to an invoice and the customer can be billed for that time. So just an example around, again, how this is flowing back into the financials for you to be aware of. You might also notice in the bottom left that we have a field here for projects. So your cases can also be tied to Acumatica's project accounting system, just one more area where we break down the barriers and allow these different modules to talk to each other. So if you're using project accounting or project costing and want to tie your cases and your case billing to that, this would be the area that allows you to link those activities back to your projects. I also wanted to bring up an example for you all that I thought would be a good one, and that would just be to show you an example of a case that I actually received in my own inbox. So we use Acumatica internally, like I've mentioned, and we use our own case management system. There are partners that are looking for assistance from our pre-sales team to make sure that, if they have assistance in the product that they need help with, they can just enter a case. It will get directed to the correct individual based on the information that they've entered. And then not only does that case get routed to the dashboard of that individual, but we can also trigger an email notification to be sent. So I pulled up my Outlook again, but this is a real example of a case that was assigned to me. You can see that this is the email that I got sent directly to my inbox. I get a summary of what the case is about, and I also get a link directly to that. So if I click on that link, it's going to bring me into my internal Acumatica and directly to the case, which I don't think you all need to see today. So I'll just get us out of that example right there. But I did just want to bring it up because that's a real life way that an organization, which happens to be Acumatica, is using Acumatica. Okay, so one example of cases for you, and the next thing that I think would make sense to close this demo with would be a brief discussion around the customer portal. So I started today's demo with a few slides where I mentioned the customer portal, but let's actually dive in and, it's not what we want, take a look at it. So I have a link to my portal here, and I'm just going to sign in. And Acumatica's portal is a self-service environment. So what it's going to do is it's just going to take Acumatica that you see here, and it's going to narrow down the permissions to give your customers essentially a very, very slim permission to access Acumatica. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to log in here to the portal. And when I do that, I see, first of all, that I have a number of, or much less options than I did internally here. So you notice before I had my banking, my finance, my payables, my receivables. But when I log in as a customer, I only have a few options. And that's to see my profile, which consists of my financial statements and my documents or any AR contracts. I only have access to my orders and to my support. So I can create new orders, I can create new cases from this portal, and I can update any information about my own company. A lot of people really like this in the fact that they can print their statements. So if you're doing a business that requires, somebody to actually go in, call up your sales team, request an invoice, request the status of an invoice. You need to print those out. You need a copy of that report. You can actually just use the portal to provide that self-service environment. So if I go here under my documents, I'm going to see a listing of all of the past documents with this particular customer. And just like I said a moment ago, if I wanted to print out this account history, a lot of customers like to get that type of access to see this data history with the full amounts and balances in there. So not only can they access that type of financial information, but they can also access the full item catalog to place their own orders. This being linked to the ERP can actually bring up just the inventory items and the pricing for whichever customer is logged in. So you see here I'm logged in as Sam Malone. If I had applied a 10% discount to Sam's account, when he logs into the portal now, he's only going to see pricing that includes that 10% discount. So it's very specific to the individual that is logging in. And then you can really use this as a shopping cart. So you can start to select the items you want to add to your order. Just say add to your cart here. And it really gives you this very narrow, I shouldn't say narrow, but a very light version of e-commerce is what you're going to get in this section of the portal. So I can say proceed to checkout, and I can go all the way through to actually purchasing an item directly from the portal. It's going to save the address of this customer on file, again, from the internal CRM. And it's also going to save any payment information about this customer on file from the CRM. So if I had a credit card that was stored, we can save that customer's credit card information, and we're PCI compliant. So it doesn't actually store the full credit card number, but rather it's going to store the token or the mask to authorize that credit card at a future point in time. And finally, like I mentioned, you can submit new cases from the portal as well. So just like that case section that we saw a moment ago, I can go in, I can review any of my past cases, I can create new ones here, and based on the parameters that I define on that case, so if I choose high priority, that could trigger who it gets assigned to on the back end in the ERP or the CRM. Okay, so there's a picture of the portal for you as well. I know we covered a lot of information today, and when we're talking about CRM, it's a bit of jumping around the system. So I do just want to recap for all of you. This is a fully integrated system with financials, with marketing, with sales automation, and with service support. So the case management, which is what we talked about towards the end of our demo. Because you have this full visibility across the system and you have things like your dashboards, email notifications that are being sent to you from different areas across the system, it allows you to greatly improve your customer service because you can respond to your customers' requests more efficiently. The portal, of course, is a great way to just empower your customers, and everyone wants this type of on-demand functionality. They don't want to have to call you up every time they need help. They like to just be able to log in online and take care of themselves. So the portal is definitely one that we're getting a lot more requests for in 2018. We saw a lot on the marketing side, so we looked at Hubspot for a moment, but then being able to track any expenses and revenue that is related to that marketing. And Acumatica as a platform is what is allowing you to integrate to some of those external systems. Outlook and Hubspot were the two that I talked about today, but I will also mention that we provide an integration to Salesforce. We do, of course, have our own internal CRM, but we know that Salesforce is a very common CRM in the industry. Many companies are more comfortable using Salesforce, or they have hundreds or thousands of people on their sales team that have been using that product for a long time. So if they're more comfortable using Salesforce, we also do provide an integration to that tool as well. So another thing to keep in mind today. Now, that is it for my demonstration today. If you do have any additional questions, you have my email there, as well as the info@acumatica.com if you don't have any questions at this point. But I believe Adrian has been keeping track of any questions that have come in so far. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to defer back to you, Adrian, if